area around the seal for the side hatch. And they have since left. They cleared out of the blast danger area. And now the only 4 people who remain inside the perimeter of Launch Complex 39A are right there on your screen. The crew for Crew 10. This Dragon Endurance spacecraft is a special one for NASA. It's also special to Jessica, as you noted so well, and talking about the name of Endurance, and a historic ship that helped Shackleton cross the Antarctic. The Dragon spacecraft Endurance will take Crew 10 to space today in its 4th space flight. Since its first flight in 2021 for Crew 3, SpaceX's Endurance Dragon has been a workhorse for NASA's Commercial Crew program, flying mission after mission. It has safely carried astronauts to the International Space Station. With Crew 7, Endurance proved its reliability yet again, marking its 3rd journey to orbit. In all, Endurance has flown 10 astronauts and 2 cosmonauts to and from the International Space Station. And it's supported international crews from NASA, ESA, JAXA, and Roscosmos. Live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew 10 launch to the International Space Station. We are T-minus 1 hour and 17 minutes and counting until liftoff of Crew 10 on a Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station. Crew 10 will be the latest crew to fly as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, which uses private companies to transport people to and from the orbiting lab from right here on U.S. soil. We've had a great countdown so far. What a beautiful shot. The Indian River Lagoon in the foreground. In the background, the Falcon 9 rocket and Endurance spacecraft with Crew 10 on board. Weather is 95% go. The only tiny concern is the formation of cumulus clouds, but as you can see from this view, we don't have many of those around here, and that's a good thing. Excitement is starting to pick up as we get closer and closer to liftoff, and Jessica, it's been a good day so far.
Yeah, absolutely. The weather looks perfect, and much to Vapor and other Air Force jet pilots' delight, no need for umbrellas today.
That's right.
Crew getting comfortable, getting closer and closer. They're getting excited. You know, Daryl, it's been 5 years since the Demo 2 mission, which was the first crewed mission of SpaceX, and that was an interesting timing. That was actually just after I left the ISS. I left in April of 2020, and Demo 2 occurred in May, and since then, we've had 11 crewed flights. This will be the 11th crewed flight, so this will be the 10th rotational flight for crew members after that Demo 2 flight. So pretty impressive that all of that has happened in that 5-year period. And another fun fact, the Demo 1 mission, which was of course the mission without a crew for that very first test of the Dragon and docking to the space station, that was when Anne McClain was on board for her first mission in 2019. So she played a very crucial role of getting in Dragon and doing all of those checkouts after that vehicle had docked to the space station. So pretty cool full circle story here of Anne being up there for that first uncrewed mission, and now in Crew 10, the 11th crewed mission in the last 5 years. So pretty impressive.
How about that? She saw the first Dragon come up, and now she's on board the 11th. And for you too, right there at the beginning, you know, we're on our 10th operational mission, as you mentioned, and now when you look back, you think about just being right there at the beginning of the commercial crew program when that Dragon docked at the ISS. It was really exciting for, you know, the entire country was so thrilled to have the ability to fly to space from American soil again.
Yeah, it was really wonderful to resume that aptitude to send rockets and with crew members on board from American soil again from here in Florida, and of course still trading off regularly with our Russian counterparts with Soyuz flights. So we're still continuing to fly American astronauts on the Soyuz, and as you see, we have a Russian cosmonaut on the Dragon today. So really nice that we maintain this spirit of international cooperation on board the International Space Station. Especially, as we said, with that 50th anniversary of Apollo Soyuz coming up in July. Another spectacular view. I think it's going to be a very beautiful launch day for all the people on the ground here in Florida.
Absolutely, we are headed in that direction. And hopefully so with the weather, because the weather gets a little iffy once we get into the weekend. So this is a prime opportunity to go.
Just like that prime number 73 for Expedition 73.
That's right. Let's grab another quick social question, Jessica. We're with Jessica Meir, NASA astronaut. Mohammed Therick asks, apologies if I didn't get your name correctly, What lessons from the Crew 10 mission will influence future astronaut rescue and contingency planning for the ISS and beyond?
I think for that one, there isn't really
and
something...
Launch control on countdown for crew awareness. We'll be commencing with fuel bleed in approximately 2 minutes. Expect some pressing and venting from the vehicle.
And we can see the venting and that fuel bleed that's happening right now as it comes off the transporter erector. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit earlier about how whatever vehicle you launch on, that vehicle remains docked to the International Space Station as your lifeboat, essentially as your rescue vehicle. Even though you launch and you're not going to land for 6 months or more, you have that vehicle there at all times in case anything happens on the space station, anything happens to a crew member, though we needed to get the crew home safely. So we always have that rescue capability. From time to time, as you've seen in the last few years, we do have various situations emerge. If there's a technical issue on a certain vehicle, for example. And so we do what we do best here at NASA, and that is adapt and reevaluate and replan. And to me, that has always been the most impressive thing of working at NASA. When I am most impressed about NASA, it's when we have these challenges, because you see NASA rise to the occasion and do what we do best, readapt and be flexible. And that's the same thing for all of these rescue missions. We will replan and do whatever we need to do.
Good afternoon. You're watching live launch coverage of NASA and SpaceX's 10th rotational flight to the International Space Station. I'm NASA's Daryl Nail, and with us again today is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. It's great to have you back again.
Thanks, Daryl. It is wonderful to be here. Sending your friends and colleagues up to space is always the best thing that you can do as an astronaut here on the ground. So I'm so excited to be here playing a role in all of it.
And a big reason that you're here to see your good friend Ann McClain off to space. Liftoff for her and the rest of the crew is at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time from here at Launchpad 39A. But before we continue our coverage, a quick reminder about Jessica's experience in space. Take a look back to 2019. Jessica Meir and Christina Cook made history with the first all-women spacewalk, the 221st for Space Station Assembly. 2 years later, Jessica served as astronaut support person for Crew 10, or Crew 2, rather. There you see her, number 38, helping the team all the way to the pad. Then she went over to pad 39B, where she rehearsed with the Artemis 2 crew. A great time with the astronauts was had, but this time, this crew was practicing to go to the moon.
I really like this video because it shows the enthusiasm that we all bring to the roles, whether it's a support role or whether it's a crew itself. There is nothing better than sending your friends off to space, as I just said. So one of the most interesting things about our job as astronauts is doing different things all the time. It is an incredible time to be an astronaut right now, where we have so many different vehicles we can launch on. The Soyuz, like I launched on, the SpaceX Dragon that you're watching here today. Soon, hopefully, coming up next year, the Artemis 2 vehicle will launch and send our first astronauts to an orbit around the moon. So it's a very exciting time for us.
We certainly have a lot to look forward here on the Space Coast and for the United States space program. Some background, though, on today's launch attempt. It is the second launch attempt for Crew 10. On Wednesday, NASA and SpaceX stood down from the first attempt after teams discovered a suspected pocket of air trapped in the ground support hydraulic system used for the clamp arm that you can see there on your screen. It is wrapped around the Falcon 9 rocket and holds it to the launch arm. Yesterday, ground support teams successfully flushed that hydraulic system, and now it is ready to go for today's launch. The crew had a little bit of break while they worked on that.
Yeah, they did. The crew was able to relax yesterday. I think it was a very fortuitous opportunity because, you know, the day before you launch, they're still probably doing all of these things that are giving them a little bit of stress, dealing with last-minute issues. And then yesterday, they had already done all those things for the previous launch. So they had yesterday to really relax and then just a chance to be outside at the beach house and just take it all in, appreciate some of the sights and sounds and feels of the Earth before they go to their new home on the ISS.
Crew 10 will be launching from pad 39A that you see there. Big props to our flight operations crew right here at the Kennedy Space Center for those beautiful views. You see the helicopter on the left part of your screen orbiting around the pad, going in circles, and appropriately so, here on Pi Day. Once the crew,
I'm sure making Anne McLean feel right at home, too, the sweet sounds of the helicopter in the distance.
Absolutely. A helicopter pilot herself, and all of them pilots inside the capsule today. In a little over an hour, this spacecraft and rocket will lift off. So let's take you through the rest of their launch day previously leading up to this moment. After waking up and having a bite to eat, SpaceX helped Crew 10 into their suits, as you can see here inside the historic crew quarters suit-up room. They also played a card game, a tradition to use to get their bad luck out of there, losing for the commander and the chief winning. Then we saw them walk out, Crew 10, waving, taking the same footsteps as every NASA astronaut since Apollo 7 in 1968, walking out, greeting the crowd, getting into their vehicles, and then joining a security-escorted caravan for a 20-minute ride to launch pad 39A. And then there they are, looking up and looking out as they walk down the crew access arm into their spacecraft on top of the rocket, and now they are locked and loaded inside the spacecraft. And we are watching them live while they await the next big milestones, the fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket and the arming of the launch escape system. Throughout this broadcast, we've been taking your questions from social media, so keep sending them. Hashtag AskNASA on NASA's YouTube, Facebook, X, and Twitch platforms. Also, for those of you watching on NASA's YouTube channel right now, a reminder to make sure you refresh your player or browser to join our live chat. Now, at this time, we are expanding our coverage and would like to welcome SpaceX and NASA commentators joining us live from Hawthorne, California, where the SpaceX mission team is located. And a great good afternoon and welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Daryl. I'm Jessie Anderson, a Senior Production Engineering Manager here at SpaceX.
And I'm Anna Schneider with NASA Communications. We are excited to be joining you once again from Mission Control here in Hawthorne as we count down to liftoff of Crew 10 just over an hour from now. Of course, Crew 10 is our 10th operational mission with SpaceX, flying astronauts for long-duration missions to the International Space Station. Crew 10 will have 2 first-time flyers on board, as well as a veteran NASA astronaut and a veteran Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, astronaut. And the multinational crew represents 3 different space agencies, with NASA, JAXA, and Roscosmos all represented.
Today's crew will fly aboard the Dragon spacecraft named Endurance, which previously flew the Crew 3, Crew 5, and Crew 7 missions. Overall, this will be Dragon's 46th visit to the space station and its 14th human spaceflight mission to the orbiting lab, which includes NASA's Commercial Crew Program missions and private astronaut missions with Axiom Space. We're also celebrating the 23rd anniversary of the founding of SpaceX today on March 14th, which also is Pi Day, a celebration of the mathematical constant pi.
Now, over the last 3+ hours, Crew 10 has been going through the detailed process of getting ready for their mission to the International Space Station. So let's go ahead and take a moment to introduce you to the crew. In the commander's seat is NASA astronaut Anne McLean. She's making her 2nd trip to low Earth orbit. The Spokane, Washington native and U.S. Army colonel was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013 and has spent a total of 204 days in space, completing 2 spacewalks totaling 13 hours and 8 minutes outside of the orbiting laboratory. Next to McLean in the pilot seat is Nicole Ayers, who was selected as a NASA astronaut in 2021. The Colorado native graduated from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and is a major in the U.S. Air Force, and this will be the first spaceflight for Ayers. Serving as a mission specialist is JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and today's flight will mark Onishi's second trip to the space station. He was selected as an astronaut by JAXA in 2009 and has logged 113 days in space previously. To round it all out, the final mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, and he was selected as a cosmonaut in 2018 and will also be making his first spaceflight today. Once on board the International Space Station, Crew 10 will briefly become members of Expedition 72 and then Expedition 73 in April. They will conduct space station maintenance and scientific research to understand material flammability, contributing to future spacecraft design and study how spaceflight affects human physiology and psychology. The crew will also engage with students worldwide via ham radio and use its existing hardware with newly integrated software to test a backup lunar navigation solution.
To date, SpaceX has flown 56 crew members to space since the Demo 2 mission in May of 2020, which was almost 5 years ago. Coming up here at T-minus 45 minutes, we'll be listening in for the team to report their readiness for propellant load with a final go, no-go poll. And so far, today continues to be a smooth countdown, and we're looking good for an on-time liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 39A in Florida. Now, here on the ground, the teams will be staffed around the clock in mission control just behind us to monitor Dragon and the mission, and not just for today, but throughout the entire mission, from liftoff to the Crew 10's arrival at the space station, all the way through splashdown when the astronauts return back home. And on console or headset in mission control, which you can see there on your screen, there are 6 key positions. The mission director is in charge of the room and tasked with making real-time decisions to ensure mission success. The person that you may hear talking to the astronauts is the crew operations and resources engineer. You'll hear us refer to them as the core throughout the broadcast. And there are 4 additional team members focused on vehicle systems, including avionics, navigation and control, software, propulsion, life support, and communication with ground support teams. Now, apart from mission control, our Falcon 9 team...
Dragon SpaceX, cycling orbit tank isolation valves to equalize low flow pressure. Additionally, I can give you a go to step into Section 5. When ready, report go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, copy Section 5 and work.
Just pausing for some comms between the core and Crew 10. Now, apart from mission control, our Falcon 9 team is currently located in the Launch and Landing Control Center at Hangar X. And we are now less than an hour until launch, and they are settling in for final checkouts, propellant loading, and getting ready for launch itself.
Yep, and NASA has its very own set of team members at NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, who have been preparing the International Space Station for Dragon's arrival. The teams in Mission Control Houston recently gave their go for launch, confirming that the station is ready to receive Dragon and the new crew. Following liftoff, today's flight to the space station will take about 28 hours, with Dragon flying autonomously the entire way. Docking is targeted for 11:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Pacific, tomorrow, March 15th. And just like autopilot on a commercial aircraft, the crew always has the ability to take manual control of the spacecraft if needed.
And before all of that happens, as the booster returns to the launch site and slows down from supersonic speeds, people in the immediate area may hear a brief double clap of a thunder-like sound known as a sonic boom.
Similar sonic booms like this were heard during the return and landing of the space shuttle, and sonic booms like these are one of the hallmarks of reusable systems like Falcon.
Here's what some of these booster returns have looked and sounded like on previous missions.
I know a lot of people will be excited when they hear the sonic boom.
And these are going to provide quite a show, because you're going to hear the sonic booms.
That sonic boom is great for us.
That thunderclap broke the sound barrier.
We are now at T-minus 57 minutes and counting to today's launch. While we wait, let's check in with NASA's Gary Jordan at Johnson Space Center to see how things are shaping up at Mission Control in Houston. Gary, how's it going?
Hey, Jesse. Hey, Anna. Thanks for having me. Welcome again to Mission Control here in the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We're the hub of human spaceflight at NASA, and the team here is poised for launch and preparing for the crew to lift off and begin their journey to the orbiting laboratory. In the home stretch of rendezvous, NASA and SpaceX flight controllers will enter into what's called integrated operations. Both flight control teams will conduct a series of go, no-go polls for Dragon Endurance's docking to the International Space Station. Rotation missions like Crew 10 help NASA continue to maximize the important research and technology demonstrations made possible only in the International Space Station's unique microgravity environment. The space station is critical for NASA to prepare for future commercial low Earth orbit destinations and to understand and overcome the challenges of long-duration spaceflight necessary for a long-term presence on the Moon and crewed missions deeper into the solar system, including Mars. Now here's a closer look at the mission and what Crew 10 will have to look forward to during their stay aboard the International Space Station.
The Crew 10 mission is going to be a rotational mission to the International Space Station.
So we will launch aboard the SpaceX Dragon capsule and the Falcon 9 rocket.
I'm just enjoying the way towards the launch. Of course, I'm looking forward for the day of launch.
And we are going to stay there about a half a year.
So the first goal of Crew 10 is to continue learning about the Dragon and the Falcon 9 rocket that we're going to be flying on to enable SpaceX to continue their development of rockets and even private astronaut missions in the future. The other mission is to get us safely to the International Space Station so that we can crew this incredible national orbiting laboratory that we have and continue the science experiments that we have ongoing there.
One of the unique characteristics of the International Space Station is microgravity.
We get to learn how humans and plants and other types of hardware react in the space environment and the microgravity environment.
And it helps us to develop all kinds of new materials, medicines, and it helps us to push our knowledge forward.
The discoveries that we make on board the International Space Station then inform what we do on Earth, and it allows us to further both humankind here on Earth and get to further places in the universe.
So I've often been asked why we explore, and I think it's different for everybody.
When people are born, they naturally want to explore their environment, first as babies, and then as kids, and finally as adults. That's how we expand our world, and that's how we find something new.
Every time that we make a further step, we learn something and we learn how to adapt, and that is so important to humanity.
This is probably the main things which drives us forward and helps us to survive as a species.
There are so many unknowns in space, and as explorers and as humans, we want to find out what's in that unknown. For me, it's the fact that I get to be a small piece of figuring out what the unknown is and taking that next step to get to the Moon and to Mars and the Artemis program.
Our ultimate goal is to go to Mars, but it's not an easy journey, and when we face a new challenge, we must solve it step by step.
I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the International Space Station. We're outside of the atmosphere, and now we don't have the protection of the atmosphere. What happens, and how do we better prepare our people, our hardware, our food, our water systems for that deep space exploration? It's really important on the space station that we learn those lessons now when we're in low Earth orbit. That way we know what we need to bring with us when we go onto the Moon with the Artemis program.
One of the things that we do on the International Space Station is work with our international partners all across the world.
I think it's hard to overestimate the value of international cooperation in space exploration because we all know that it takes much time and effort.
Space is hard, it's very challenging, it's sometimes unpredictable, and that's why I think cooperation is the key to success.
The International Space Station wouldn't be international without all of our partners.
And our goal is to be a beacon of hope for all of humankind so that people can look and say, this is what we can accomplish when we work together.
T-minus 52 minutes and counting. We just pulled go for NASA and SpaceX to begin propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes. A great update there to our milestones. We now have NASA's Megan Cruz live from a nearby launch viewing location here at Kennedy Space Center. Megan.
Hey, yeah, back here again today, and the weather is as beautiful as it was Wednesday, and the crowd as excited as ever to see liftoff in less than an hour. Now, we again want to bring in Mike Ravenscroft with NASA's Commercial Crew Program. He's on console working the launch today over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Mike, great to have you back.
Hi, Megan. Happy to be here.
All right, so again, thanks for stepping off console. When we spoke during Wednesday's launch attempt, there was a ground hydraulics issue. What was done to resolve that to get us to launch today?
Yeah, Megan. So the team worked really hard on Wednesday during that first attempt to resolve the issue. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get there. So the teams, the SpaceX and NASA team, met Wednesday evening, Wednesday night, and developed a troubleshooting plan to go ahead and restore this system back to operational. So we went ahead and met, and Thursday they went off and executed that plan. They went ahead and opened up some of the valves, did some inspections, opened up some of the valves, and went ahead and bled the system. And then they did perform checkouts and performed the checkouts, and the system was nominal at that point. So we got back here today on launch countdown, and did some additional checkouts, normal checkouts that are performed on day of launch, and everything's checking out good.
That's wonderful to hear, and it's always great to see teams coming together to resolve issues to get us to launch. Now, as CCP's Launch Vehicle Systems Office Manager, you were also part of keeping an eye on today's booster, correct? Which is flying for its second time.
Yeah, Megan. So we watched that booster from the beginning when it's starting to be built, the whole way through production, the whole way through all the testing that's performed, even before it's getting that first launch, which occurred in December for the Empower-E mission. So we track all that, track all the issues that come out from all that in the first flight, and we review all that data. And then when it goes into maintenance for our flight, we are tracking all that work along with SpaceX and ensuring that the vehicle is ready for day of launch and a safe flight for the crew to the ISS.
And Mike, last question for you. How do you feel just being a part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program?
This is awesome. I can't imagine myself anywhere else. This program, I've been here for quite a while, and this is a family. You get to work with folks from all over the country, from California to Texas to Alabama to here in Florida, and it's just a family, and that's how we feel about each other. We work hard. We get to work with a lot of great contractors, and so day in and day out, you get to show up for work and enjoy what you do.
Yeah, and do amazing things together. Mike, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Megan. Appreciate it.
All right, let's get back over now to Anna and Jesse in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Megan. Falcon 9 is the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Together, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy have completed more than 450 launches and over 380 reflights.
And today, the booster will be attempting to land at Landing Zone 1, which is just down the coast from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This will be the second flight of the first stage booster supporting the Crew 10 mission.
Rapid reusability drastically reduces launch costs, helps increase launch frequency, and enables a wide array of new government, commercial, and scientific opportunities in space. Lowering the cost of access to space is helping take humanity's next steps into the solar system, whether in low Earth orbit, interplanetary, or even deep space. And when costs are lower, government and commercial customers can launch more missions, which helps accelerate development. This also helps commercial satellite and private research customers afford to launch more projects to space, which helps stimulate innovation here on Earth. All of this to say, reusability is the key innovation that is making space more accessible for the industry as a whole. And just like the first stage of Falcon 9, Dragon is also reusable.
The reusable Dragon spacecraft has flown people to the International Space Station 13 times. And as we mentioned earlier, today's crew will fly aboard the same Dragon that previously flew the Crew 3, Crew 5, and Crew 7 missions.
But back to today's mission. We are coming up on T-minus 48 minutes to launch, and our teams are carefully moving through the pre-flight process. Now, a lot of preparations have brought us to this point, including a dry dress rehearsal, static fire on Sunday, and an initial launch attempt on Wednesday. Now, we did stand down from that attempt due to a hydraulic system issue, but the teams completed inspections of the ground support hydraulic system used for the clamp arm supporting the Falcon 9 rocket and successfully flushed a suspected pocket of trapped air in the system.
Now, all of that hard work brings us to today's launch. And next up in our
the team has pulled go for LES arm, propellant load, and launch.
And there, you just heard that the team had pulled go for both prop load and for launch. So that was the next step in the countdown that we were waiting for, and that was from the SpaceX launch director, and they were calling up to the crew to let them know that we had received that go to continue with that prop load. And then as we mentioned earlier, the Dragon launch team, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch and Landing Control Center at SpaceX's Hangar X in Florida. And the launch director will also check in with the Dragon mission director, referred to as the MD, and the NASA launch manager to make sure everyone is on the same page and everyone is ready to move forward. Again, there's a lot of teams and a lot of moving parts to getting a launch off the ground. And so leading up to the final stages of launch today, you will hear various check-ins on that process. So right now, there on your screen, you can see Crew 10. They are on board Dragon, waiting to get the green light to stow the crew arm for the launch and arm the launch escape system. And we did just hear that go, so we should start getting a good view of that access arm moving away from the spacecraft pretty soon. Now on the range side of things, the range continues to be go for launch, monitoring the clearance area surrounding our launch pad, as well as the air and sea space along the flight corridor.
And as you can see in your on the left-hand corner of your screen, the weather is looking great for today's launch. Overall, weather is trending in the right direction, and we currently have less than a 5% chance of violation at our target liftoff time today, which is great. Our teams will continue to keep an eye on the weather, but we'll have a final pre-fueling weather briefing in about 20 seconds from now at the T-minus 45-minute mark. Now, weather is forecasted to be excellent on the Space Coast heading into today's launch opportunity. And again, the current forecast is greater than 95% chance of acceptable conditions at launch. Now, weather along the Atlantic
T-minus
coast...
45 minutes. Both control rooms go into lockdown and remain in that state until the launch escape system is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console and maintain a sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarming of the launch escape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and their approval during the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed in the launch abort auto sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Crew X's arm retraction starting.
And that was the launch director performing a briefing with the crew. Sounds like everything is go for launch, and we're going to start seeing that crew access arm moving away from the vehicle here shortly.
We should also see propellant load getting underway in just a few minutes as well. Again, our teams are staffed around the clock in Mission Control here in Hawthorne, Mission Control in Houston, as well as the Launch Control Center to monitor Dragon throughout its entire mission from liftoff all the way to Crew 10's arrival at the space station and then on its return home to Earth. And there you're seeing some great shots of the crew access arm pulling away from Dragon. Clear skies as far as the eye can see. Perfect weather for today's launch.
Getting exciting over here. Weather looks amazing over there at pad 39A. You can see that crew access arm still moving. It'll move all the way to that 90 degrees away from the vehicle.
Crew access arm retraction complete.
And there we just heard confirmation that the crew access arm has been fully retracted. That process is now complete. Again, the next step in our process leading up to today's launch at 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific will be the propellant loading, and that should be getting underway here shortly. In the meantime, let's go ahead and check back in with Daryl at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. Back here with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir as we orbit the launch pad, Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center, going in circles on Pi Day. Seems fitting, Jessica.
Absolutely, it does. This is the day for it.
We've got a few milestones coming up here in the next few minutes. We're going to close our visors at T-minus 39 minutes and then start the process of getting that launch escape system armed. As we just saw, the crew access arm has moved away, so if there were to be an emergency, going through the crew access arm is one option up until the point in which the launch escape system is armed, and then it's off the top of the rocket.
Yeah, that's right. That launch escape arm could actually swing back in just about 30 seconds, and during that time, the crew would actually be unbuckling their seatbelts and getting ready to egress, so that timing would work out.
Copy, Dragon. You are go for 6.6 arm launch escape.
Running these milestones early at this point, which is a good thing. We heard Commander...
Launch escape system is verified armed.
There we have the verification that the launch escape system is armed, a high energy system that could be very much needed in case something were to happen to the rocket.
Yeah, that's something that the astronauts on board can actually hear. They can hear it being armed. They get this sort of loud thump that they hear. And of course, that launch escape system, it consists of 8 Super Draco thrusters. It's only used for an abort in this case. And it's armed 2 minutes before the loading of the fuel.
And I'm wondering about your thoughts in this moment as you hear Commander Ann McLean get these systems ready. Your friend, your fellow classmate, getting ready to go.
Yeah, I think things are getting very real right now. It's really interesting on launch day. You know, I know from my own experience, sometimes you actually have to remind yourself that it's actually launch day because you have been through this whole series of readiness and all of these checks and all the comm checks and all the physical actions so many times in various simulations. I remember on my launch, I really did have to remind myself, I'm looking at my monitor, I'm going through all of these different cues and the procedures, but then I would hear something, maybe the groan of the fuel in the lines or a slight movement of the rocket, and that was what made me realize, oh, wait a minute. At the end of this one, I'm not going to be going home and going to dinner. I will be in space. So perhaps that realization is kind of setting in for these 3 astronauts and cosmonaut. I'm sure it's a little bit different for Ann and Tak, who have gone through a launch before. Totally new for Nicole and Kirill. So a really nice blend of experience in that Dragon capsule today.
And a beautiful scene outside as we head towards sunset. We'll be lifting off just before then at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Sunset right around 7:30. It should make for a beautiful launch for those who are gathered in the area to watch. The sky will become lit up as the sun dances with the exhaust from the Falcon 9 rocket.
These launch escape systems that we're talking about are, of course, a vital component of any vehicle that contains astronauts on board. And it's something that we hope, of course, to never have to use. But the few times historically when we have had to use them also provide such a testament, such a great test of that system. I remember very well Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin's abort on the Soyuz that happened in 2018. I was in training at the time in Star City, and that abort happened when they were at about 30 miles up, and they ended up going up to about 50 miles and then landing safely due to the very reliable, highly functioning abort system. Search and rescue teams were there to pull them out in about 10 minutes. And a really stressful day, of course, for everybody.
And actually venting for propellant load.
That was a stressful day for everybody on board and everybody on the ground, but again, a really nice test to see that these systems are in place for a reason and they do work.
Nick Hague went to space that day and came right back. And fortunately, everything went well, and he was able to return to the ISS, and he's up there now.
Yeah, he's up there right now waiting for this mission to join him. I know that he's very much looking forward to giving Anne and her crew a big high five, especially for those 8-ball classmates, but really for everybody on board. We joke in our class that, you know, Nick launched 2.5 times so far for his 2 missions to space, but he's got a little bit of extra experience.
We have learned so much during your time here, Jessica, spending it with us, giving us your insight and talking about your experiences in space flight. We appreciate it deeply. Also, the audience appreciates it as they continue to ask questions on NASA's social media channels, #AskNASA, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and X. Dolores Kiefer asks now, can the ground crew talk to the astronauts during fueling?
Yeah, they can. We just heard a call go, and those comm loops are open. You know, of course, we can talk to the crew if in case of any type of emergency or any type of information that they need. We have those comm loops open. Interestingly, speaking about that, the crew can actually hear the fueling process. So they can hear the valves, they can hear the flow of the fuel as well. So interesting for them to be following along with the process.
Can hear it, see it, and feel it. Just a few seconds now before we start propellant load for the Falcon 9 rocket.
The launch auto sequence has started.
And here we go. Tanks are being filled. Prop load is underway. A very dynamic time for the astronauts and the ground crews. For this countdown today, we got a little further and have gone further than our attempt on Wednesday, which stopped at T-minus 43 minutes. We are now T-minus 34 minutes, and everything is looking good. The vehicle is go, spacecraft is go, ground teams are go, and now we are tanking this rocket.
So this crew is hearing those sounds. As we mentioned, they can hear the fuel flowing through the valves and flowing through the pipelines. And this is a rocket-grade kerosene called RP1 and also liquid oxygen. That is the fuel for this powerful Falcon 9 rocket today.
1.8 million pounds of thrust once the rocket takes off. Thanks to our Kennedy Space Center flight operations team for these beautiful helicopter shots. Doing a great job. Let's go back now to Hawthorne, California, and join our commentators there.
We are at T-minus 33 minutes from launch and getting closer and closer to launching Crew 10 into space. After the long-duration mission is complete, Crew 10 will be the first NASA commercial crew mission to target a return splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. NASA and SpaceX have been working together toward certification and readiness for Dragon recoveries on the West Coast. Since 2019, Dragon recoveries have primarily occurred off the coast of Florida. SpaceX is moving Dragon recovery operations missions to off the coast of California to allow Dragon to complete its deorbit before safely jettisoning the trunk over the Pacific Ocean, comparable to the first 21 Dragon missions. Crew splashdown locations are near Los Angeles, Oceanside, and San Diego. The recovery vessel Shannon will be stationed in Long Beach, California to support the new operations. And to establish this capability that improves public safety, NASA and SpaceX worked for months establishing new sites, obtaining regulatory approvals, performing engine assignments and software changes, as well as tabletop exercises and flight rule updates.
It'll be really exciting to see Crew 10 come home after they're done with their long duration mission. But Crew 9, who Crew 10 will be handing over once they get docked to the space station, will of course still splash down off the coast of Florida in a few days. But back to today's mission, let's go ahead and learn more from the astronauts flying today.
You know, I often get asked why we explore. Some people explore because it's exciting to ride on a rocket. They like the boom, they like the flying, they like the electronics, they like to go fast. Some people want to explore to answer questions about the context in which the Earth exists. How old are we? How many galaxies are there? How big are we? Are we like a speck of dust on somebody's sleeve, or are we the biggest thing going out there in the universe?
Curiosity is like the main power that moves us forward. Space exploration is important to satisfy this curiosity.
As we go on to the moon and Mars and look at what those planetary bodies are made of, we can learn a lot about the Earth itself and how to better humankind.
I think it's important for us as a species to expand our boundaries, because that's how we advance our technologies and civilization.
We have to continue to explore, continue to push the boundaries.
And I think really throughout the history of humankind, we've always explored. And so when people ask why we explore, I would like to ask back, what type of society would we be if we lost that curiosity? Is that somewhere that we'd want to live?
Space Center in Florida, I'm Daryl Nail, joined by NASA astronaut Jessica Beer. So good to have you here. Here's more about the crew that's going into space today. I'm Daryl Nail with NASA. Welcome back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, here with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. Here's more about the crew that's going into space today. NASA astronaut Anne McLean, she is your Crew 10 commander, making her second trip to low Earth orbit. The Spokane, Washington native and U.S. Army colonel was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013 and has spent a total of 204 days in space and completed 2 spacewalks totaling 13 hours and 8 minutes. She's very competent and, as you've described, a very excellent leader.
Absolutely, a natural leader, and it is so thrilling to be here watching her do what she was born to do and leading this crew to space today.
Sitting next to her is the pilot for Crew 10, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. She was selected as a NASA astronaut in 2021. The Colorado native graduated from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and is a major in the U.S. Air Force. This is her first space flight, and she's pretty excited about it.
Absolutely.
Takuya Onishi. He is the JAXA astronaut, serving as a mission specialist. Today's flight will mark Onishi's second trip to the space station. He was selected as an astronaut by Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency in 2009 and has logged 113 days in space, and he will eventually be the station commander.
Yeah, that will be a very nice moment to see as Anne hands over those leadership reins over to Tak. Transfer of controls from her as the commander of the SpaceX vehicle over to Tak to be commander of the space station. So great opportunity for leadership for both of these experienced crew members.
And the second mission specialist is Kirill Peskov. The Roscosmos cosmonaut was selected as a cosmonaut in 2018 and will be also making his first space flight today.
This is really the ultimate of Kirill's very curious and adventurous nature. I hear he loves to discover all aspects of and areas of Russia and the U.S. now in his SUV, and he is always exploring. So this will be the ultimate of his exploration today for him and for all of his crew.
And all 4 of these crew members are pilots. they speak that common language of aviation. That must be comforting to all of them.
I think so, and I think it has brought them closer together as a crew. They can almost read each other's minds, they say. Sometimes, they don't even need words, and they have this shared sentiment, this shared language. It makes them a very synchronous, cohesive crew.
And for the past year and a half, that crew has been training diligently to be ready to help conduct science investigations aboard station. The crew will perform biomedical research and technology demonstrations over the 4-month expedition. Commander Anne McLean is participating in the Canadian Space Agency space experiment involving heart health.
This headband is actually connected to sensors throughout my body, and they are collecting real-time data on my heart rate, oxygen saturation, and my respiratory rate. Imagine the day where you go see your doctor because you're concerned about your heart health, and they give you these sensors to wear, and they get this massive, comprehensive look at your cardiovascular health over multiple days doing multiple activities.
Another science investigation on board involves tiny materials inspired by our own DNA that could help be used here on Earth with those people who suffer from arthritis in their knees. Let's go back now to Megan Cruz, who is standing by with NASA Acting Administrator Janet Petro.
Yeah, that's right. Acting administrator since January. And then, of course, before that, center director here at Kennedy since 2021. And how does it feel to be back here to watch another crewed launch?
Oh, my God. I can't, Megan, tell you how excited I am to be here. And I was here the whole week. We had unfortunately had the scrub on Wednesday. But I cannot explain the feeling of coming back home. I love this center. I love this workforce. I love the mission that we have here at the center. So it was very exciting. In D.C., it's not my normal job jar down here at the Kennedy Space Center being center director where, I had the workforce and the mission. So I'm super excited to be back here and to be able to witness this launch later tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Launch is going to happen here shortly. And, I know we've been talking about this a lot in the broadcast that every single member of Crew 10 is a pilonaut. Yes, actually. A pilot, as are you. Did you get to talk to the crew? I see that they've signed your hat.
I absolutely did. So I got to see them a couple times. So when they landed at the landing facility here, I got to see them and greet them. And that's where they gave me this hat, which is so cool. I've never gotten a present from a crew before. So Crew 10, hats off to them for giving me, and they did sign it. And then on Tuesday, we got to go what's called Behind the Glass tour and talk to them. They're behind a glass because they're in quarantine, and we got to talk to them and ask them questions and talk to them and just see how they were doing. And so that's pretty special. So I got to talk to all of them, all of those pilots there, and they are super excited, ready to go.
Yeah, and speaking of excited, we have NASA astronauts Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, Nick Hague, plus Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. They're going to come back shortly after Crew 10 arrives on station. During a live press conference from station recently, Butch and Sunny said they're going to miss space.
Absolutely, because you got to think about the astronauts. And by the way, last week from Johnson Space Center's Mission Control, I did get to talk to Butch, Sunny, Nick, and a little bit to Don Pettit there. So I got to talk to them as well. But you got to figure they, to be selected and trained and the passion that they have to go to space, for them, it's got to be, this is what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. This is what they're going to do. And in fact, I would bet they might have some mixed emotions for leaving because, every time you get to go to space, which is what all astronauts want to do, you never know. It might be your last time because you might not be selected for another mission or whatever. So I bet they have mixed emotions leaving their colleagues up there at the space station. I'm sure they're anxious to get home and put their feet on Earth and spend time with their family, but I think that they have enjoyed their time in space. When I said behind the glass to Butch and Sunny a while ago, I asked them, and they had told me that they hope they get to stay a little bit longer than 8 days in space. That was at their behind the glass. Now, I don't know if they meant to stay as long as they got to, but I know that they are a valued member of this expedition crew, and they've done amazing research. They've done spacewalks together. I think Sunny now holds a record for the most amount of time in the vacuum of space. So they have to be very, very proud of what they've accomplished. They were very much integrated as a crew and did a lot of work on the station, research and science experiments. And so, yeah, I think they're going to miss space. I think so.
Well, Janet, no mixed emotions here. It was great seeing you. I'm going to put this in a jar of memories of today because this was wonderful, and we're about to see lunch.
All right.
Great
Thank
to
you,
have
Megan. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. We'll send it back to Daryl and Jessica.
All right, thank you both. And just behind them, as you saw in that shot, was the Vehicle Assembly Building, a very iconic building here at NASA, where we recently reached a major milestone in NASA's Artemis program. That's, of course, preparing for the first crewed mission around the moon in over 50 years. Engineers finished stacking the twin solid rocket boosters for Artemis 2. These 177-foot tall boosters will provide most of the 8.8 million pounds of thrust needed to launch 4 astronauts on a 10-day lunar journey. And there's a shot of the core stage, which they're starting to work on now. Since November, crews have used a massive crane to lift and assemble those booster segments. They're each packed with avionics and motors that will safely detach after launch. Now, with the completion of that, they're going to focus on the SLS. Artemis 2 will carry NASA astronauts Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Christina Cook, along with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, on a mission around the moon. So here's Jeremy now with a little more about that.
Hey everyone, I'm Canadian Space Agency astronaut Colonel Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist for the Artemis 2 mission. I'm here at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas, where we normally do most of our training. But every once in a while, we like to change it up a bit. Reid, Victor, Christine, and I recently spent several days in Iceland trading in our spacesuits for hiking gear to study its geology and surroundings. Why Iceland? Well, as you can see, it has a similar landscape and terrain to the moon, with various volcanic rocks like basalts and breccias, and has limited to no vegetation. The Nordic island has been a lunar training site for NASA astronauts since the days of the Apollo missions. My crewmates and I teamed up with scientists and geology experts to explore the huge boulders, formations, and volcanic craters across the lava fields. During our journey, we stopped at various spots to discuss what we observed.
Some of the really fine material is compacting into what's like the glue holding this together.
And even tested different types of tools to collect rock samples. Although we won't be landing on the moon during our mission, this field work and navigation practice will allow us to make informed observations when passing the lunar surface and pave the way for future Artemis crew training. And that's your Artemis Moon Minute.
For more Artemis updates, scan the QR code on your screen right now, or visit nasa.gov/Artemis-Roman numeral 2 or II. You don't have to worry about getting updates there, though, because, Jessica, you are friends and former classmates with both Victor Glover and Christina Cook.
Yeah, that's right. They are my astronaut classmates, like brothers and sisters, and it has been so exciting to see this Artemis journey. I was here for the Artemis 1 launch, and that just made it all so real. We saw the hardware, we saw the vehicle, we saw the launch, and we knew that the next time that vehicle launched, it would be with my friends and colleagues on board. So it was an incredibly exciting moment for all of us as astronauts.
That launch coming in February of 2025, currently scheduled on the calendar. Let's go back now to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Daryl. As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking Crew 10 to the International Space Station today. Falcon 9 is a two-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It's also the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. And sitting at the top of Falcon 9, Dragon and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft, plus one underneath the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight, and the trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo. The Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the space station. There are currently 4 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions that have docked to the station. There you can see them on your screen. That is Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, and Freedom. Now, designed to be the safest spacecraft ever flown, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond.
And Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit. Dragon has flown 49 times with 15 human spaceflight missions since 2020, when Dragon became the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. In that time, Dragon has flown over 1,000 experiments to space and 56 crew members representing 14 different countries.
Dragon has proven to be a versatile spacecraft. It can autonomously dock to the space station when outfitted with the International Space Station docking adapter, as it is for today's flight. When it's not going to the space station and in free flyer mode, the docking adapter can be swapped out for a cupola. Another option that we have is the Skywalker hardware, which supports extravehicular activities as the crew used during the Polaris Dawn mission. Now, continuing down the vehicle, we do have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC engine, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. After stage separation, the MVAC will ignite and carry Dragon to its target orbit. Now, the Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected by the black inner stage, which houses the MVAC engine and the system that decouples the 2 stages during stage separation. And below that is the first stage.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
Good call out. Stage 2 LOX loading has begun. Below that is the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift.
Dragon SpaceX reporting that we continue to track no issues with Dragon or Falcon proceeding to launch.
SpaceX Dragon, copy.
Great news, just calling out that we're tracking no issues. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off of the ground through the lower, thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Now, each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust.
And after stage separation, stage 1 will return to Earth for recovery and reuse on a future mission using a combination of the Merlin sea level engines and the 4 titanium grid fins located near the top of the booster, which will guide it during its re-entry and landing. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy and allow for vertical landing on a drone ship or landing pad. Now, today we will be attempting to return the booster to land at landing zone 1. The second stage will power Dragon into its initial low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station using its own thrusters. About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing the guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station. With T0 coming up in just under 15 minutes, our teams are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready to go.
And we are still looking good for an on-time launch today. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy. As we continue to listen and watch the countdown, our teams are preparing the vehicle for flight. Propellant loading of both RP1 and liquid oxygen began at T-minus 35 minutes. And we also heard the call a few minutes ago that the launch escape system is armed. The launch escape system is designed to propel Dragon away from Falcon 9 in the event of an emergency during launch. Now, the range, which is monitoring the keep-out zones among other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues, and they are go to support today's launch.
And weather also continues to look good. You can see it there on your screen, clear skies. And we are still tracking a roughly less than 5% chance of violation at our target liftoff time of 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. And as you heard earlier, we're continuing to be optimistic that we're going to maintain these good conditions into launch. And as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window driven by our planned rendezvous point, the point at which Dragon and station will meet in orbit. The station is orbiting the Earth at more than 17,000 miles per hour, and Dragon needs to catch up. That means we have to deliver Dragon to the correct orbit by timing its trajectory relative to the orbiting laboratory so that they are in the same place in orbit at the same time. So precise liftoff time is crucial for hitting that rendezvous point. And at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we would have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity, which is Saturday, March 15th at 6:41 p.m. Eastern, 3:41 p.m. Pacific. But again, everything and all the systems continue to be go. And for now, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary at the Johnson Space Center for a quick status update from Houston.
Hey, thank you, Anna. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, teams continue to work around the clock to monitor activities aboard the orbital outpost. Leading the teams inside the room is Flight Director T.J. Creamer. The team in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will track the autonomous docking of Dragon Endurance when they enter joint operations. This will happen when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, the invisible boundary stretching 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers that helps us monitor all arriving and departing spacecraft, is essentially the neighborhood of the space station. Once docked, crew members in both Dragon and aboard the station will perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the spacecraft's hatch for Crew 10 to float into the station and begin their stay. We anticipate that the hatch will be opened about an hour and a half after the docking. When they enter the orbital outpost, Crew 10 will be greeted by the rest of their Expedition 72 crew and will come together for opening remarks. That's all from us here in Mission Control as the anticipation continues to build for launch in under 20 minutes. How's it looking on the Space Coast, Daryl?
We're looking great, Gary. Looking fantastic. We've got fantastic weather, 95% go. You see the beautiful shot outside of the pad there, the rocket and the spacecraft. When it launches today, the crew aboard the ISS, the destination for today's launch, will be about 260 miles over top of the west coast of Australia. So too far to see the launch. It's nice to see a rocket go off when you're on the ISS, but unfortunately it won't be the case this time.
Oh, yeah, it is a wonderful thing to see when your crewmates are heading towards you. I remember a photograph that Christina Cook took of my Soyuz approaching the station, and one of these incredible opportunities that you could see the outline of the trajectory of the Soyuz as it approached, and it's such a beautiful image. It's a shame they won't be able to see it, but they will be so excited to have their crewmates come on board.
And we're about to hear from the crew here before launch. We'll hear from them after launch. It'll be special. They have some important things to say.
Oh, absolutely. I am very excited to hear these final thoughts coming from the entire crew right before launch.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll send it back to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Daryl. Our next major milestone on the countdown event will be around the T-minus 10-minute mark, which is just in about 5 seconds, when Falcon 9 launch commit criteria get checked by computers.
Dragon, SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, displays are configured for launch. And with that, this is the pilot, Nicole Ayers. And on behalf of Crew 10, we'd like to say that today we celebrate the countless individuals all over the world that have made this journey possible. To the engineers, instructors, flight controllers, scientists, and leaders who worked tirelessly to get us here, thank you for your dedication to the safety and success of this mission. And a special thank you to our friends and families for your unwavering love and support. This mission is a testament of what humans can achieve when we work together. Go Crew 10!
Such great words from the crew. Again, and some cheering going on. You can see that on your screen.
SpaceX copies. And from the entire SpaceX team here, it's been a pleasure working together to prepare for this mission. And from all of us, good luck, Godspeed, go Crew 10, and enjoy the ride.
Great comms. That was from our core here in Hawthorne in Mission Control. Now, there are many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and the crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight. And now that we are in terminal count, our teams are performing those final checks before launch.
And coming up here in just a few minutes, we will start having that stage 1 engine chill start. And now we're just over 8 minutes away from launch. Again, today's ride to orbit will be about 9 minutes, which is from the time of liftoff to second stage cutoff. And then Dragon in the second stage will continue to coast for a few minutes after that prior to separation. You'll hear some performance calls along the way as we get into the final countdown and then after liftoff. And these are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones. So some of the callouts you will hear after liftoff are a combination of letters and numbers, which will mark different abort zones throughout the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two are 1 Alpha and 1 Bravo, which are abort modes available while the first stage is firing. And then the next round of numbers and letters you'll hear are 2 Alpha through 2 Echo, though you'll only hear the 2 Alpha call on the public loops, and those will come into play once the second stage kicks in. And then diverting a little bit from the other naming system, you will hear the call out Shannon, which refers to Shannon, Ireland. And this call means the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort late in the second stage burn. And you'll continue to hear those different callouts along with key performance callouts from the guidance, navigation, and control officer along with the propulsion lead. We're now just under 7 minutes away from launch.
Engines are chilling in for flight.
And we just heard that confirmation that the stage 1 engine chill has started.
Yeah, exactly. That call out is because we are flowing a little bit of liquid oxygen into the engines. That's to help prepare the vehicle or the engines for the full flow of liquid oxygen into the engines. That makes sure that we don't shock the system at that full flow. Now we are still loading. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming about 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us prevent that thermal shock into the engine. So again, we have passed that T-minus 7 minute mark. Next call out will be stage 1, RP1 loading complete, which we just heard that.
And the RP1 is densified kerosene or rocket fuel that will propel the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is now fully loaded into the rocket, and since we previously heard that second stage loading was completed. We are still loading the liquid oxygen or LOX onto the first and second stages, and this is the oxidizer needed to combine with the densified kerosene that just finished loading. The RP1 liquid propellant needs an oxidizer to combine with in order to ignite. Coming up in just under 30 seconds at that T-minus 5 minute mark, we will hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power.
Tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
Correct. Configure for terminal count.
And there we just heard that call out for terminal count. So now Dragon onboard computers will take control of the spacecraft. And we also heard that the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional structural support to the rocket as we get ready for that strong back to retract. And that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines.
Started.
That strong back lower has now started, and again, that strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for both propellant load and the different gases being loaded on board.
And what you should see on your screen is there's those clamp arms that are around the second stage just below Dragon. They're going to open up, and once they're fully open, then that strong back or the TE can begin to recline away from the vehicle. Now, initially, we are going to recline that TE just about 2 degrees away from the vehicle, and then we will fully move the TE about 45 degrees away up at T0. And they're maybe a little hard to see on your screen, but the clamp arms are opening up there. There's a better view. Looks like the clamp arms are now fully open, so that TE will begin to move away from the vehicle. Very slow and slight, but just enough to get two degrees away from the vehicle.
And then coming up in less than 30 seconds at the T-minus 3 minute mark, the first stage liquid oxygen or LOX load will complete. And we'll continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones, including one around the T-minus 2 minute mark before flight, where we'll hear liquid oxygen loading is complete on the second stage. And now you see all of those white clouds on your screen. Those are clouds of vapor, and they're completely normal, and we'll see them continue to build up as we get closer to launch. This is because liquid oxygen is super chilled, so a little of it will boil off in the warmer Florida air.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
Great call out there. Stage 1.
Count and on.
Putting liquid oxygen onto stage 2, and that'll wrap up here at the T-minus 2 minute mark, just about 20 seconds from now. And once we finish propellant loading, that will mean that 1 million pounds of RP1 and liquid oxygen will be loaded onto Falcon 9 here, just under 10 seconds.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
We just heard confirmation that the stage 2 liquid oxygen loading is now complete. We are under 2 minutes away from launch. Gas closeout has also begun. So we're now isolating all of the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. And those gases will then get vented overboard through umbilicals and the strong back. And you just heard that call out that Dragon is an
Ground gas
aisle.
closeouts, expect loud venting.
Well, you can hear that venting now. Obviously, rockets are very loud, and the sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. The ton of water absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the rocket. And that call out for auto idle puts the rocket in a state the flight computers understand before it takes over, making sure the transition to final countdown is smooth and all the flight computers on board are in sync and configured for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And now we just heard that Falcon 9 is in startup.
In countdown.
And in the final countdown, less than a minute to go, and at the time of launch, the space station will be flying 260 statute miles over the west coast of Australia.
Dragon, SpaceX. Go for launch.
And great call out.
SpaceX, Dragon 10, copy, go for launch.
Great call out that we're go for launch, and we do have a large crowd here in front of Mission Control,
T-minus 30 seconds.
waiting to watch Crew 10 take off today.
T-minus 15. T-minus 10. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go NASA Crew 10. Copy, 1 Alpha.
And liftoff of Crew 10 now
Vehicle stitching down range.
Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew 10. And we're continuing to get good call-outs on the first stage performance so far. We're now 40 seconds into today's flight.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Continuing to get good performance call-outs.
Throttle down.
Yeah, we are throttling down the engines in preparation for Max Q. What great timing that was. We just passed through Max Q. That's the largest structural load that the vehicle will see on ascent.
Vehicle supersonic. Stage 1 throttle up.
We're now just over 1 minute and 10 seconds into today's flight, traveling at more than 1,400 miles per hour.
Stage 1 Bravo.
And we just heard that call out for 1 Bravo, which means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. And the crew already pulling over 2 Gs. Next up, we'll have a couple of events happening in rapid succession.
Back chill started.
First will be that engine chill on the second stage impact engine, which we just heard. And then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and second stages will be separating from one another. Then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry Crew 10 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Now we're just 2 minutes into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling just under 4,000 miles per hour.
We're just about 20 seconds away from those events that Anna just mentioned. The 9 Merlin engines will shut down here in just about 10 seconds for MECO, stage separation, and SES-1.
Main engine cutoff.
SpaceX Dragon, 2 Alpha. Stage separation confirmed.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
Great call-outs and incredible views there on your left-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, you can see a view from stage 1. And an extremely excited crowd here in Hawthorne. Awesome views of that boost back burn on the first stage, as well as the MVAC engine igniting on the second stage. Great views there. Now the booster is in its boost back burn. This is the first of 3 burns as it makes its way back down to Earth. This will last about 45 seconds. And the crew, 10 crew, is still onboard Dragon attached to Falcon 9 second stage, which you can see there on your right-hand screen.
And we're now at 3 minutes and 20 seconds into today's flight. The vehicle is traveling about 6,500 miles per hour. And they are on their way to the space station. And we did have that confirmation coming up of the boost back shutdown. And then coming up at the T+6 minute mark. And there we have our first images of the crew inside the Dragon spacecraft as they make their way into orbit.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Continuing to get good call-outs.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
Stage 2 continues to be on power with in its firing until we get to that second stage engine cutoff around the 9-minute mark of flight. About 5 minutes of flight to go before Dragon will be flying free.
Some cool views there on your left-hand screen. That's the first stage booster as it's making its way back down to Earth. This is a ground tracking camera getting these awesome views.
And on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see that lone Merlin vacuum engine of the second stage. We're continuing to get good performance on the second stage. And the crew's G-loads will dip right when we hit the separation events, and it's going to continue to build up until then.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
We're now at 5 minutes into today's flight with the liftoff at 7:03 p.m. Pacific, 7:03 p.m. Eastern, 4:03 p.m. Pacific. Continuing to get good call-outs as Stage 1 makes its way back to Earth, and Stage 2 continues to fire, propelling Dragon into orbit.
If you're just now joining us, the 4 members of Crew 10 launched from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And they're currently on board Dragon, still attached to Falcon 9 second stage, which you're seeing there on your right-hand screen. On your left-hand screen, the first stage vehicle is making its way back down to Earth. It already completed the first of 3 burns as the boost back burn. And the next event coming up for that vehicle is going to be the entry burn.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Great call-outs there. That entry burn is coming up.
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
That entry burn is coming up here in just under 20 seconds. We'll reignite 3 of those 9 Merlin 1D engines to help slow the vehicle down as it makes its way back into the Earth's atmosphere.
We're now just over 6 minutes into today's flight as Dragon and the second stage continue traveling at over 12,000 miles per hour, making their way into orbit and on the way to the International Space Station.
There, we just saw on the screen, it was very quick, but we had the entry burn, which we got some cool views of that from the ground, which is awesome. Now, the next event coming up will be the landing burn for the first stage. That's coming up here in about 30 seconds.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Again, great call outs for
SpaceX Dragon, copy nominal.
Confirmation there from the crew as they continue to make their way into orbit. Now 7 minutes into today's flight, the first stage making its way back down to Earth and the second stage continuing to fire.
This is an awesome view. Let's see if we can see the center engine relight for that landing burn here in a few seconds. There's that landing burn. Let's watch as Falcon 9 touches down on landing zone 1. And the crowd here is excited to see Falcon 9 touch down on landing zone 1.
And now that the first stage has made its way back to Earth, we're about a minute away from the second engine cutoff, which we're expecting around the 9-minute mark of today's flight. We're continuing to get good call-outs, and Dragon and all of the systems on the vehicle are performing as expected. Just over 8 minutes into today's flight, traveling more than 21,000 miles per hour.
Terminal guidance.
Hearing good call-outs. We're about 30 seconds away from that second engine cutoff, and then shortly after that, about a minute or so later, we will have orbital insertion.
SpaceX Dragon, Shannon.
SpaceX copy, Shannon.
And that call out there for Shannon, and that is the call out for Shannon, Ireland, which is the final abort stage for the second stage off the coast of Ireland. Standing by for a second engine cutoff.
And back shutdown. Dragon SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
And there we heard confirmation
Launch
of
escape system disarmed.
good confirmation of orbital insertion. Crew 10 is now well on their way to the International Space Station following a 9.5-minute flight uphill.
Now, the second stage is preparing for Dragon separation here, which should happen shortly. In about 10-15 seconds is what we're expecting. And we're preparing for stabilizing the second stage so that we can have a smooth separation.
And there you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, the crowd is going wild. There on your screen you can see that Dragon separation, that second stage making its way, and Dragon is now flying free. 10 minutes into today's flight, that was about a minute after we had that second engine cutoff and orbital insertion. And it looks like a good separation, good rates. Dragon now flying free. There on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see some first images of Crew 10 inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as they're now successfully in orbit.
Dragon, SpaceX Chief Engineer on Countdown 1. On behalf of the entire Falcon team, we thank you for flying with Falcon and wish you a great mission. Over to LD.
It was an honor flying with you this evening. We wish you well on your journey and give Crew 9 our best. Thank you for flying SpaceX.
SpaceX Dragon, this is Crew 10 Commander Ann McClain. Thank you to all of the teams from across the world who contributed to the launch today. Spaceflight is tough, but humans are tougher. Days like today are made possible only when people choose to do the harder right over the easier wrong. Build relationships, choose cooperation and believe in the inherent goodness of all people across the world. To my family and friends, without you, I would not be here. Explore boldly, live gracefully, go Crew 10. And over to pilot Nicole Ayers.
Nicole Ayers again. We're not the first humans to get to orbit, and we wouldn't be here without the bravery and hard work of those who have paved the way for human spaceflight. We now get the unique perspective of Earth without borders and get to revel in the connectedness of humanity. I would be remiss to not once again acknowledge those who helped me get here, to this wonderful view and this perspective, to the teachers, coaches, fellow officers, fellow teammates, Raptor Nation, to my friends and family that encouraged my dreams from the start. Thank you. I wouldn't be here without you.
This is Mission Specialist Takuya Onishi. I want to say a huge thank you to NASA and SpaceX, especially the Falcon 19 for the successful launch, and we are looking forward to a smooth ride to the International Space Station. 日本の皆さん、たくさんの応援ありがとうございます。9年ぶりの無重力の感覚をかみしめてます。これから先の ISS への宇宙の旅、楽しんでいきたいと思います。I will now hand the mic over to Mission Specialist Kirill.
Thanks a lot to NASA and SpaceX for this wonderful ride, and I want to say a couple of words in Russian. Пользуясь такой чудесной возможностью, хочу поздравить с 65-летием со дня начала подготовки первого отряда. И также хочу сказать спасибо большое за те знания и жизненный опыт, который мной были получены в всех стенах для того, чтобы выполнить этот полет. А также спасибо школе номер 14 города Назарова, Ульяновскому высшему авиационному училищу гражданской авиации и авиакомпании МКАР и Нордвин, где я начинал свой путь в небо. И, конечно,